BC's Stephanie Gosk outside the courthouse in Brooklyn. Stephanie, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Lester. This is a man who was once dubbed the king of R&B. He wrote that song, I Believe I Can Fly. He won 3 Grammys from it. It was an anthem of sorts in the mid-90s. Now going to prison, potentially for decades. 1 charge of racketeering, as you said, other 8 charges of sex trafficking. And you might hear racketeering and think, isn't that for mafia bosses? But this was part of a unique strategy on the part of federal prosecutors to introduce sexual assault allegations that were well outside the statute of limitations. And at the center of this case, Lester, was the story of Aaliyah, a pop singer who many people know died tragically in a plane crash in 2001. According to testimony, she met R.Kelly when she was just 12 years old. A witness, a compelling witness for the prosecution, said that she actually walked in on R.Kelly performing a sex act with Aaliyah when she was either 13 or 14 years old. We then heard from one of his employees that at the age of 15, he bribed an official in Illinois to get a fake ID so that Aaliyah could marry R.Kelly at the time, who was 27, because he suspected Aaliyah may be pregnant, and if they married, she could not actually give any testimony against him in a statutory rape charges. But it concludes dozens of witnesses coming forward with depraved allegations of abuse, physical, emotional, sexual, a number of alleged victims. And as you said, this was a trial that lasted weeks, but prosecutors argued that this was actually something that was decades in the making. His defense over the course of the trial tried to portray the victims in this case as out opportunists who were looking for money and fame, but very clearly here in the end, the jury decided the prosecution had made its case, Lester.
And Stephanie, he has been in custody leading up to this, correct? And Stephanie, he has been in custody leading up to this, correct?
Yes, he has, for 2 years. And this is not the end of the road in terms of the charges that he faces. He still has state and federal charges, sex trafficking, sexual assault, as well as pornography charges. He was acquitted on pornography charges back in 2008, but at this point, he still has weeks, years, months down the road where he's going to be dealing with these allegations in a courtroom. But he is, for now, facing decades in prison. His sentencing due to take place May 5th here in New York. Lester?
All right, Stephanie Gosk outside the courthouse. Joining me now, NBC legal analyst Danny Savalos. And Danny, Stephanie kind of hinted to this idea that the prosecutors had to get a bit creative in order to get some of these cases in front of a jury. Does that increase the likelihood, the chances of appeal here?
Stephanie's exactly right. Arguably, the defense's biggest asset in this case was the complexity and arguably the awkwardness of applying federal racketeering charges to a person who now is convicted of using his business in order to satisfy his sexual urges. It's not the traditional application of racketeering law. Normally, that's been applied to mafia-type defendants who are engaged in loan sharking or money laundering, not Mann Act violations, which is transporting women across state lines to commit sexual crimes. So while you do have an awkward application of federal RICO statutes here, on appeal, because the law is written so broadly and so favorably to prosecutors, there are less avenues for appeal. But of course, to the criminal defendant, there is always something to appeal upon conviction.
Danny Savalos, thank you. Let me bring in former New York federal and state prosecutor Tali Farhadian Weinstein. She's also an NBC News legal analyst. And I'll put the same question to you. Does this creative use of the racketeering statute make this, did it make it a more difficult case? And what does it mean about potential for appeal?
So I expect that R. Kelly certainly will argue on appeal, as he argued in front of